Today, we're talking about more keys to victory for the Washington Commanders as they get set to take on the Las Vegas Raiders. We're also going to be talking about what Coach Joe Witt Jr. and Kliff Kingsbury had to say before practice today. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting, Terry McLaurin, Debo Samuel, Zach Ertz, and many others for multiple touchdowns this season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about some more keys to victory here for the Washington Commanders. And so thought about two going into this show. And this first stat, really, it's not anything that you can necessarily measure. And I think that this is something that really, I think a lot of teams are going to have to face really throughout the early part of the season. And so the first key for the Commanders to get the win against the Raiders here is going to be that they're going to have to get into rhythm. They're going to have to find their identity and really get their mojo back as a team. And so let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And really, what do we mean here? And so look, Jaden Daniels through the first two games, he's been sacked 7 times. And so 4 times against Green Bay and 3 against the Giants. And so I got a chance to see this article, which is on SB Nation. And within this article, what it is talking about is it talks about the amount of just pressure rate that Jaden Daniels has had. And so it says this in this particular piece. It says that Daniels has faced a 4-man rush on 75% of his dropbacks. And then, just going into what I just said here with the sacks, defenses have just accumulated 7 sacks in 2 games. And so that just lets you know, how these opposing defenses have really caused havoc early on this offense. And so, I think that what that comes down to when we're talking about finding rhythm and talking about finding identity is just really this team is just really starting to, I think, learn how to play together this season because, you look at preseason football, it's just not the same as it used to be back in the day where you played the starters and things like that more than you do now. And so I think that really you see a lot of people out there that maybe are pressing the panic button around the Commanders because they're 1-1. It really has not clicked the way that it was last season just yet. And I think that it's just going to come down to time and just really getting to your rhythm. And so, just looking at what this offensive line has really faced, through the first couple weeks of the season and what they're getting ready to face here this week. Look, you had Dexter Lawrence, you had Abdul Carter, you've had Brian Burns, you've had Micah Parsons. Now you're getting ready to take on Max Crosby. Like, these guys are elite as far as getting to the quarterback. And so, even with, just 4-man pressures, these guys are very good as far as collapsing the pocket and getting these pressures and getting to the quarterback. And so, it's important that the Commanders offense just really hangs in there. They continue to grow because remember, I think that there was a little bit of shuffling here in training camp due to some injuries and things like that. We're still waiting on Sam Cosmi as well. And so I think that this is something where you come into this game and hopefully you're able to just really get into rhythm early. You establish this identity. And so hopefully we see some better pass protection. We also see that this team is able to open up some running lanes for its running backs because that's going to be important. And then also too, just being in the spaces that you need to be in as wide receivers and tight ends. And so I think that timing is just a bit off. And so that's the first point there looking at the offense. And then defensively, look, I think that with Coach Joe Witt Jr. and this defense, I think that they've looked very good in the first couple weeks. And so I know this last game was not very good, but considering where this defense was a season ago as far as stopping the run, so far, I've been very impressed with that. And so I like the fact that Joe Witt Jr. has been able to take this roster now with these new players and really revamp that part. And so now it's all about the secondary, which I thought was going to be the strongest point of this unit, really getting into a rhythm. And so right now we're continuing to see some penalties back there that we don't want to see, especially with Marshawn Lattimore. So hopefully he can can kind of button it up. Not saying that it's solely him, but there's some things there and some mistakes that need to be cleaned up. And so this team is kind of giving up some big plays there. And so I think that really comes into just really getting into rhythm here within these first couple weeks of the season, understanding, where you need to be at with your keys and things like that. And so that is point number one for the Washington Commanders. And so number two for the Commanders, I think the real second key for this team is just that they're going to have to continue to not give up the big play. I think that is key in this game, because I think that the Raiders are definitely going to try to stretch the Commanders down the field, much like we saw with that Green Bay game. And so just going back to that article, one of the things that I saw, around that game with the Commanders and the Packers is just it was Jordan Love and the Packers' ability to really stretch the field. So it said that Jordan Love attempted 5 first-half passes traveling at least 30 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's not including the 39-yard touchdown that went to Jaden Reed that eventually got called back due to the penalty, but said that was the most for any player in the NFL since Love became the Packers starter in 2023. And so the significance of that is that the NFL is a copycat league. And so I think that the Raiders really in their first 2 games have shown that they will definitely go down the field. And so I think that this is something that the Raiders are definitely going to try with the Commanders. And so I definitely think that we're going to find out just how buttoned up this secondary is early. And so I think that if they're able to just really limit these big plays and keep everything in front of them, they're going to be just fine. But this is maybe an indication again of what we are going to see, moving forward, is just that teams that are going to want to try the Commanders down the field and maybe willing to maybe take chances with interceptions, because one of the key points out of this is that the Commanders have yet to get a turnover. And so maybe as a quarterback coming in, you're thinking to yourself, look, if the deep ball is there, maybe their defender is there, I have maybe a 50-50 chance of getting that ball to my guy, because the Commanders have not turned anybody over yet. And so I think that is going to be the game within the game coming up here. And so those are my 2 initial keys, is that the Commanders are going to have to really keep everything in front of them. Do not give up the big play. And then also, too, it's about getting into a rhythm, finding your identity on both sides of the ball, and just really getting this team back to its mojo. And so one more point, too, just about the defense and really how, revamped it's been. Again, they've done well against the run. And I think that this is a test where they can show that, look, they are not going to give up anything against the run, because when you look at the Raiders have struggled over the first 2 weeks of the season with the run, because right now coming into this thing, Ashton Genty has had 19 carries for 38 yards in week 1. And so he had 1 touchdown there. It's a 2.0 average. Week 2, he came back against the Chargers, 11 carries, 43 yards, 3.9 was his average there. And so right now he's averaging right around 2.7 through the first 2 games. Again, it's early on, but still, I think that this is going to be a great test for the Commanders, because if you can go ahead and just eliminate the running game of the Raiders and really make them one-dimensional, now you're going to force them to throw the ball into the secondary, which leads me to my next point, because Joe Witt Jr. before practice, one of the things that he talked about really, and just the thing that the defense really struggled with against the Packers, was just they lost as far as just the eye test. He said that the eyes were not where they needed to be. And talking about that, he was talking about more discipline in the misdirection, and just also to where their eyes are at. And so understanding the keys, understanding where you need to be, understanding your reads, understanding the concepts, when offenses decide to bunch up things and stuff like that. Now, he did say that the communication was there and the checks and all that stuff like that, which he loved, but he continued to talk about really just the Commanders' defense really being in the right place with the eyes. And so they're going to be tested here. And I know that Brock Bowers is coming in, and he's, definitely a guy that can get it done. He is coming in a little banged up because he does have I think, a knee injury. And so that may be why he was not as effective in that game against the Chargers this last time out. But still, this is a guy that's very capable. And so far, we've seen tight ends get loose. And so let's see what happens with this defense. And again, this secondary, it's going to be highlighted this week. And so we'll see what happens now that Jonathan Jones is not there. Again, when you're talking about stretching the field, you're going to put a lot of pressure, back there on your safeties. And I think so far, when you look in the secondary, to me, I think that Trey Amos has done a terrific job. I think that maybe teams might be trying to press a little bit more with Marshawn Lattimore, see if they can draw some penalties and things like that. And so, again, that's going to be the game within the game. And so next, I wanted to talk a little bit here about Kliff Kingsbury and just what he had to say about the offense. And so, briefly, I think some of the notes that just come to mind out of what he said was just that it's good to have, two quarterbacks that can start in the National Football League. And so he's talking about the possibility of Marcus Mariota starting. And so once again, we do not have, the answer as to who is going to start. I just left off with this last video talking about how really they're going to find out what Jaden Daniels is looking like on Friday. And so that's still very much, it seems like a door that is open. So we'll find out from there. But it sounds like that Kliff Kingsbury here is really, confident in Marcus Mariota. And this is exactly why you go out and you re-sign a backup quarterback like him, because he can get it done. And so I think he definitely can. And then next, the next thing that he talks about too is just the running back by committee and just how everybody is going to have to step up, and that is something that we've been talking about. And so I wonder, with the running back situation, do we see some more of Deebo Samuel out there? Because I think that he probably is going to have to step up and really be an X factor back there, at least until Chase Edmonds is up to speed and ready to go. And speaking of Chase Edmonds, Kliff Kingsbury does say that, look, he has a ton of confidence in him. He's played in the system before. And so this is a guy that they definitely have plans for. It's just a matter of him just kind of getting ready to go with this offense here and, probably getting up to speed with where things are at with the Commanders. And so those are just some of the notes here from Joe Witt Jr. and Kliff Kingsbury. And so just paraphrasing that, if you want to see what they had to say before practice, you can head over to the commanders.com YouTube page and look at both of those interviews in full. And so next, before we jump out of here, I just wanted to also talk about just the injury updates around the team. And so right now at the time of this particular recording, it's just showing me up to Wednesday with the updates here. And so just looking at the team website. And so I did talk about Trey Amos and just really how he was limited in practice with the shoulder. And so it says a limited practice on Wednesday. With John Bates, it said that he did not practice Wednesday. Noah Brown, we talked about that. He did not practice. Jaden Daniels did not practice. We talked about that. Zach Ertz, rest, did not practice. But what I found interesting on the injury report is that Jeremy McNichols' hamstring had a limited practice Wednesday. And so that is going to be very huge going into this game, because you've already lost Austin Eckler for the season here. Jeremy McNichols is definitely going to have a major role with this team. And so not a good sign necessarily that he's dealing with a hamstring, because that is exactly what Jonathan Jones went on the IR with, was a hamstring. And so those, soft tissue injuries can be very tricky. And so hopefully it's not anything major, but that was the most recent update there. And that was on the team website. And so next, I wanted to go ahead and jump into just the last bit of news that is great for the Commanders. And that is that, look, the stadium is definitely coming. And so it looks like that the stadium got its final approval and that the Commanders are looking to go ahead and open things up here in 2030. And so, look, it is great to see that the team is headed back to RFK Stadium. And so, man, I mean, just remembering, just looking at the games that took place there and just the stadium rocking up and down and everything else. And so, this is going to be a different feel, now with the roof and everything on the stadium, and just how, it's going to look as far as the technology and stuff that I'm sure goes with it, and how they're going to rebuild everything up. And so, it's great to see that the team is going to head back to a place where they've been super successful. And so hopefully this is going to be one of the keys that gets the Commanders back to a Super Bowl. And so hopefully they get a Super Bowl before they open up the stadium. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking about the new stadium getting its last vote. And they're going to go ahead and start building that thing up. And then also, too, let me know what you guys are thinking when it comes down to these keys as well. Because like I said before, two major keys going into this week. It is going to be getting this team's mojo back. And so I'm not ready to go ahead and press the panic button because it is only 2 weeks in. And I think that even if you have started off 2-0, you're still a team that you want to continue to establish your rhythm. You want to continue to get to your identity. And so, look, some teams get there, sooner than others. And I think with the Washington Commanders, you're at 1-1. You're in a prime position here. Hopefully you can take care of business against the Raiders. I think that Marcus Mariota is going to be fine out there as a starter. And I love the fact of just going ahead and resting Jaden Daniels out there. And so this offensive line is going to be able to figure some things out. I think it's going to be much tougher for teams to get home, with just 4. And I think that also, too, even though the schedule is tougher than it was a season ago, I think that this team comes together better, which is why you don't have to worry about just teams getting home with just the 4-man pressure. And so, like I said, Ryan Burns, Micah Parsons, now you have Max Crosby coming in. So that is a tough start for this team. And then also, too, you're hoping to offensively as well that opportunities are going to open up down the field. And so one of the things that Kliff Kingsbury does say that I forgot to mention is that with Terry McLaurin, he's getting a lot of double teams and things like that. And so really, I think that opportunities are going to open up for him as this offense starts to go down the field some more and guys start to make plays. And so that is something that is just going to take some time here. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.